13 Questions by Man Transcending. Manhood in the Digital Age.
Welcome back to another episode of 13 Questions. This time we are joined by guest Chance Provo Kid Blakelock. But before we get to the interview section of the show, I do have with me, as always, Adam Loyal. Adam,
what's up, Mr. Bill?
Not a whole lot, dude. I am super fun doing these podcasts. We kind of had a little break, a hiatus, and so it's fun to jump back in, so to speak, and keep the ball rolling. So this episode is kind of just brought to you by Instagram, I guess. Chance has been, he runs in some of the same circles as far as like what podcasts we all listen to, right? So we connected on Instagram, and I looked at his website. He's a bookworm, or used to be a bookworm, or enjoys books. Let's just put it that way. So, and
if you dig this man up in the future, you are going to find out what kind of a bookworm he is.
Oh yeah, if you find him, if you find where he's buried, you will find books. For sure.
It's going to be the weirdest grave robbing ever. It's like, should I take this home and read it?
Yeah. So this was fun. And he's also an artist too, right? So he does art, and I was taking a look at some of that, and it reminded me of some of the colors on our two new logos that our artist, friend of the show, Blake Art. I'm getting these. This is a tongue twister because our guest's last name is Blakelock, and then the artist is Blake Art. So, excuse me. But anyway, the colors were very similar, very neons, a lot of neon, and I won't say a lot of green and purple in his, but that type of color spectrum-ish. So that kind of spoke to me. And
just gonna have to go and find it.
Yeah, that'll be in the show notes. I'll put a link down there for everybody, so not to worry. But there was one little. I guess I'll do not redaction, maybe a correction before we head into the gratitude jingle, and it's in regards to the last stone, which their last stone of the violet ray that I spoke about on the last intro, and I believe I had called it Brandenburg quartz. Well, it's actually Brandberg quartz, and it just so happened that this is actually a common misconception or a common mistake made for this particular name of this particular stone, even amongst the people in the area from which it hails, which is actually in Africa, even though Brandenburg is actually the name of an airship, Hindenburg, but think Brandenburg.
Interesting. Yeah, I always think of Dr. Brandenburg, the one the nuclear material around the atmosphere of Mars.
I am not familiar with that. Does it blow up? Is it explosive?
Dr. Brandenburg shows that there's a very specific type of radiation that's found on Mars. That the only known way that we see it being produced is through nuclear detonations. There's not currently a known natural occurrence of it. And there's also a ring of this radiation on Mars going back, I think, something like 10 million years or something. So it's just one of those very interesting, there absolutely could be some sort of natural phenomenon, but it's also a very interesting remnant of, what we see in our modern nuclear bomb technology.
For real, like ancient aliens. Come on, folks. But yeah, so that was just a little correction I wanted to make with that. I don't know if the Brandenburg burned down. I don't know if there was a catastrophe associated with it, but the actual name of the mountain or the area or the mountain's name is Brandberg in Goboboseb. I believe it's near South Africa or in South Africa. So for any rock hounds out there, I just wanted to make that correction so I wouldn't get caught or whatever. I don't know how specific rock hounds are when it comes to terminology. I don't belong to any club.
They are going to get you stoned over this, Bill.
Haha.
It might just be as friends.
I already beat him to the punch before we started. But no. Anyway. Yeah, so let's do the gratitude jingle, and then we will get into what I believe is going to be uh, the last crystal stone of the violet ray that I'm going to use for our gratitude jar working, which I will explain after the gratitude jingle.
Gratitude, 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 oh, gratitude. Gratitude, 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 oh, gratitude.
So I actually did mention, or I alluded to my gratitude in the interview, but by the time you hear that, you'll already hear this. So I guess it doesn't really make too much sense to mention it now. But anyway, my gratitude for this episode is my Jeep, my 2006 Jeep Commander. I'm sending it off. So I just want to express gratitude for all the years I've owned it. And tomorrow I will be attempting to sell it to CarMax. So I just wanted to take a moment and have, no, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to have a moment of silence for my Jeep, but
Listen, man, it's a sad moment.
it is bittersweet. I was cleaning it out today. Yeah.
You mean disposing of evidence? What were you up to last weekend, Bill? Do I need to talk to Ellie?
Actually, no. Actually,
Do you have a second family? Did you get another minivan? Man, this is getting really hard to answer, Bill.
I'm not in the hot seat. What are we doing? No. So yeah, so I cleaned it out today. It was a little bittersweet, like you said. And I did, it smelled good. I had a bottle of, what was it? Vanilla scented flavored vape juice spill in my center console, like, well, I don't know, 2 years ago, and I never cleaned it up. So it's just been like this nice constant aroma of vanilla-ness every time it heats up in the car and you get in it. So I finally had to clean that spill up. And other adventures. Ellie had to take out. She disassembled a cup holder area and stuck her hand down in between the wall and the wheel well where a pin had fallen. My brother had built a fireplace grate for us, and one of the pins had fallen back in the trunk space area. There was a hole in the plastic, right? So it fell back there when I was putting it back in the trunk after Christmas. So we finally pulled that out and got it out and got the important stuff out of the glove box, right? But I didn't vacuum it or anything, so it's still full of dog fur and whatnot. But CarMax said that it will take any car that you could bring them. So we'll see what they think about this one. But yeah, hopefully I'll be saying goodbye to this car tomorrow. And yeah, it served me well, and it's been a good car. Kind of like, it reminds me of like when I moved out of my house, right? Like I took a second before I left for the last time to like kind of say thank you to the house and whatnot. And it's just, I'd make a little prayer or offering of gratitude at that moment, and why not? Can't hurt, right? So yeah, that's my little gratitude for this episode. Goodbye, Jeep. But let's talk about something.
Yeah, you can still change your mind.
Good. Who knows? They might not accept the offer. So, or they might not make me an offer. Like they may not want to buy it.
Or maybe on the way over, you'll just feel that steering wheel, start having instant regrets, sweaty palms.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, if that happens, maybe, I don't know. I doubt it will.
Well, I'm happy for you, Bill. Look forward to the best vibes on you getting the best deal possible.
Yeah. Yeah, the extra cash wouldn't help too, or it wouldn't hurt either. That's not why we're doing it. Like, we don't need two cars now. Like, I work from home, and Ellie does the eBay store, so it's not like we're commuting places, which also comes up in the interview. But let's talk about something more and more fun and happy. It's bittersweet. It's a bittersweet gratitude, which I think would make an excellent bonus question, if possibly not like maybe throw it into the regular mix. Like, what is the most bittersweet thing that you've ever done or seen? Like, kind of how we do the courageous thing, the courageous question. But maybe we'll discuss that later. Anyway, Adam, what was your gratitude?
My gratitude is something that we mentioned in the show. I think I probably misenunciated it. But it's a streamer, a guy who, well, let me take this a step back. One of the most challenging video game challenges out there has been getting what they call like a lasso 2 on Halo. It's really complicated, but essentially in Halo 2, you can get a whole bunch of skulls, and with the exception of one, each one you turn on makes the game varying levels of difficulty harder. So there's been a challenge to beat the entire game without dying, and with increased enemy rate of fire, increased damage, decreased health, no HUD, all enemies invisible. Really incredibly difficult challenge. It's been out there for a while. Somebody officially put up a $5,000 challenge, then increased it to $20,000, and Jervalen has been grinding this. He's been doing it for years, but he recently completed it, and it is heralded as being one of the, if not, well, the hardest game challenge to be ever completed. So yeah, before I was on, I was watching it. It to me is absolutely fascinating, just from so many levels and from the pinnacle of being able to do this, what it takes. It's just a beautiful thing. So yeah, it was very fun and synchronistic that kind of came up on the episode that it was, games and streaming, and it was going to be my gratitude. And I've been absolutely fascinated by this challenge. So I'll put links in the show notes for the article on it. No need to go into the geek details here. Most people probably aren't interested, but if you do want to watch the 6.5 hours run of the game like I am, you can.
Can you just like put it on ×2 speed, and so it'd be like 3 hours, or does it not?
You
does that work?
could if you're a weenie. Yeah, YouTube allows that. Faux show. So yeah, I don't know. I'm grateful for people doing beautifully challenging things and being able to watch how they figured out and cracked into things and found ways around to beat impossible challenges, and other people putting up and creating gamification systems to push them to that next level. Because, in the way of morphic resonance, all these weird things we think we're doing that aren't affecting anything are really deeply impacting what we're capable of. I notice at work, the more that I do customer service and type on a keyboard, the better my typing is getting. The more that I play first-person shooters and games, the better my speed of typing and dexterity gets. And all of these things intertwine into your mind. And, we kind of get into it on the show. The ability to read in your head is an incredible power. So, yeah. I guess I'm just grateful that we've got the tools and technology at the moment to make these things better and make ourselves superheroes.
Yeah, it's almost like psychic powers, right? There's some quote out there along the lines of like anything that is technologically advanced, like so much so that it would appear like magic to anybody, not primitive, right?
No, you're thinking of Arthur C. Clarke's I want to say it's his third law, and I'm embarrassed that I don't even know that. It better be his third law. I'm Googling this.
But you knew his name at least.
He's my favorite author. Are you kidding me? I've got tattoos of his characters on my body. Hell yeah. I'm immortally fascinated by the man. I don't know if I mentioned him as my role model or hero on my episode, but he's certainly up in there.
You did the Sherlock Holmes? Was that Sherlock?
Yeah, it is his third law. All right, I'm going to pull it up to quote it direct. Oh, thanks, article, for not having it here. Where is it? Wait.
Are you using Bing for your searches?
No, I am going to the law of record. Well, I'm gonna give a rough quote. It's essentially that any significantly advanced technology would be indistinguishable from magic. It's Arthur C. Clarke's third law. I am embarrassed. I can't even Google search right now, Bill.
So much for the typing skills, right?
Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Arthur C. Clarke's third law.
Right. Awesome. That reminds me of the actually right now during this recording, I'm actively in a Scalar Energy session with provided by Derek Condit in his store of Mystical Wares. All you got to do is sign up weekly. It's a weekly thing. You just go through the checkout process on his website, but it costs $0, right? And you pick a new frequency every week that he uses with his Scalar Energy device, which is similar to a Rife frequency machine. He's actually got more information about it on his website. He posted more information on it the other day, so I went back and checked. But yeah, the free Scalar sessions, today's or this week's frequency, because he changes one every week. It was just overall general wellness, right? So from 11 a.m. my time to like 10 or so, I think, at night. It's like it's a good chunk of the day, right? He takes everybody who signed up and puts their names in a container and puts it in this near this or between these Scalar devices, right? And tunes it to this certain frequency, and everybody gets to kind of hang out with those scalar waves for that time period. And all it's doing is you're etherically tied to it just by having your name in the container, right? And this is kind of the same idea that we're doing with our gratitude jar working, right? All we need is a name, and that's we put that in the jar with everybody else's names, right? And
I wonder if we could get 13 questions on the Scalar for the name. Is that a possibility?
Just the show? Wouldn't that just be for you and me then?
No, I don't know. Maybe for everybody. Maybe the show and all the listeners. And I don't know. I'm thinking aloud live.
Right. No, that's a good question. I'm going to have to ask Derek that. But another thing that Derek offers, and that we don't really talk about, we talked about Shungite a lot when I first started coming on, and Derek was a new affiliate. But you can get connected to the Shungite grid. He'll plant one nugget of Shungite when he goes out and does his wilderness walks, and he'll plant it like in your name, like, or you can buy it or you can buy one for somebody else and have it like done in their name, right? Kind of like donating in the name of whatever.
That's very cool. I never thought about seeding the earth with Shungite for something like that for somebody.
Yeah, kind of like a gift. It's like buying a star or a plot of land on the moon or something, right? But it's way more effective. So yeah, that's something else that you can I'm gonna have to ask Derek that, because I have a piece of his Shungite next to the altar. So I wonder if that would then mean that everybody that whose names are in there is also part of the grid too. So yeah, it's a good question. We'll have to get back to you on that. But I did mention that I do have this jar surrounded by some semi-precious stones, and we have been going through the metaphysical properties of each of them in the intros. And today, I believe we have arrived at our last stone, which is cobaltocalcite. And
I was just looking at some of that today.
No way.
Yes, absolutely. Go on, Bill. The synchronicities are afoot. I love it.
Okay. Well, this is I could only find an entry for this stone in Judy Hall's encyclopedia, so we won't hear from Robert Simmons yet. Anyway, maybe I'll find something later. But the source, the technical name for this stone that I have anyway is chrysocolla heterogenite cobaltin calcite quartz, and the entry that Judy Hall has is just cobaltocalcite. But it's a pink. It's a pink. It's got like a pink dusting or layering on the faces of one of the. This one's like a big rock, right? It's more of a rock than a crystal. But yeah, pictures will be up on the website soon. I'm going to have a page built for this. But yeah, just a little bit about the metaphysical properties of cobaltocalcite from Judy Hall. Cobaltocalcite was named kobold, or quote goblin, by German miners because they believed it to be a mischievous and malicious stone. Crystal healers see it as symbolizing unconditional love and forgiveness. In addition to carrying the genetic properties of calcite, it soothes intense feelings and assists you in loving yourself and others. Harmonizing intellect and emotion, it transfers ideas into action and facilitates finding your innate talents and life purpose. This stone supports those who carry pain for other people or the planet and those who have given up hope. Place cobaltocalcite on a photograph for distance healing and use to send pink light to support someone else in becoming all that they might be or to overcome an emotional block. So that was just a very short entry from Judy. And I don't know if it's technically a stone of the violet ray. I don't know who's in charge of making those classifications, but I'm going to say that anything within the color spectrum of like the purple or pink-ish wavelengths is probably violet ray stones, right? So
it's just a different frequency on that same range of color.
Yeah, and maybe we'll rehash some of these metaphysical properties in the future. Maybe we won't.
Well, I have a feeling this is going to be growing as we go forward, Bill. So we'll always have a chance to reference back.
Yeah, if I get a new book or something that I learn new information, of course, I'll share it. There is maybe one other stone I would like to include, and that would be Moldavite. And the chunk I have is green, and since our logo is kind of green, I thought it might be appropriate. So maybe we will do that in the future. But that is the last purple or pink one that I'm going to use for our gratitude jar altar working experiment. So if you like what you hear and that resonates with you, and you want to get on board, then just support the show. You can do a one-time or a monthly donation. It can be any amount for any time. So it could be $1 once, right? I just need some way to get your name, right? To put your name. I write it in purple ink, by the way. That's another part I forgot to add, is that your name is written in purple ink, and it's done on purpose specifically and with intention, right? So if you like that idea, support the show, and I'll write your name and add it with everybody else's. And probably going to be ended up connected to the Shungite grid. Probably going to get some more clarification. I'm definitely going to get some more clarification on Derek about that. So that'll be fun to report back to. But other than that, spread the love by sharing the show, and because that's really how we're going to grow is by sharing the show with those that we love and that we respect. And yeah, it's that simple, right, Adam?
Water your garden.
And with that, this is 13 questions with Chance Blakelock. I guess we'll get started with question number 1. What was the best advice ever given to you, and would you modify it at all today?
That's a great question. I've received different variations or different kinds of advice throughout my life, depending on the obstacles I faced. But I think one of the most important things I've ever been told, there's a couple of them perhaps, but to boil it down, are from my father. And it's like, don't take anything personal. And that's one of the big things. And there's, I think you can look to a lot of different authors, and it's not a secret knowledge anymore to not take things personal. Somebody comes to mind, Miguel Ruiz might have wrote a book about it, on the 4 agreements. So I think that's where my father might have grabbed that idea and then shared it with me. But that was one bit of advice that I was given young. I'm like, man, but that's so difficult to understand sometimes. Don't take it personal. How do you do that? How do you not take something personal sometimes when I'm a person? And it's something I'm still working on every single day of my life. Like, don't take things personal. And it's a struggle, obviously, but it's something it's good advice because it's something I'm still working on. And I received that advice as a child. There's another thing that came to mind. But it's a different kind of advice. It's my father also shared this with me. He said, anytime you're upset at anything, you're upset at yourself. I was like, that's fucking bullshit. That can't be true, right? And I said, what if someone, your best friend, steals from you, right? I'm actually mad at them. And my father retorted, he said to me, he's like, well, actually, you're mad you trusted them. So you're mad at yourself. That's where the real anger starts. You're not mad at them. You're mad that you trusted them. So those are the two things that come to my mind, because they've kind of just kept me humble and in a state of like, don't take things personal. And when I am upset, it starts with me typically. Like, I don't like other people to have the control over my emotions, so to speak. Like, nobody makes me upset. You know what I mean? Like, I don't like the victim mentality sometimes, because it takes away personal control over your emotions. So I'm in control of me at the end of the day. So.
No, I like that. It's recognizing that there's wolves in the world, and you're not going to eliminate all threats and all wolves and all dangers. You can always trip over a pothole and die. So, keep your eyes open and learn. Don't let it happen again. That's a good lesson to get from Dad.
Yeah, he's a wise man. So, but yeah, I just appreciate that advice. I still try to apply. There was one other thing. I got one other story to share about the other best advice. This is a good piece of advice. I guess it depends on how well I tell the story. So in college, in my undergraduate program, I had the honor of being in the presence of a dean of a law school. And it was a small private meeting, and I had aspirations to do big things in college. And I asked him a few questions, and I said, what's the best advice that had ever been given to you? And the dean shared a story that was given to him by a Supreme Court justice clerk or something to that effect. And the story is, whenever you're in a conversation with somebody, you always want to ask, what else? So, and that stems from the Supreme Court justice and this clerk's relationship, where the Supreme Court justice wanted to know everything that was happening on the Hill. And for those who are unfamiliar with that concept, it's like politics around Washington, D.C., and like what's going on. So the clerk, scrambling for thoughts, would share everything. They'd spill their whole mind to the Supreme Court justice. And the Supreme Court justice would just sit there stoic and listen, nod his head. Then he'd say, what else? And then the clerk just like wouldn't know what to do, thinks. And he's like, oh, I heard this when somebody was talking at coffee. And it's something small, but it's maybe important. And he'd share another story. And the Supreme Court justice would nod his head and then say, what else? And the clerk would just, keep thinking, and he keeps sharing information. And the point of the story essentially is that there's so much more you can find out from an individual when you say, what else? And the Supreme Court justice absorbed a lot more information about Washington, D.C., the political climate, and what was going on, because he never stopped asking questions and he never stopped listening. So that's something I try to do in my personal life. So, for example, in my day-to-day life with my wife, when I ask her about her day, she'll tell me, and I'll say, what else? And then she tells me more, and she tells me more. And then when she's done, and just like the Supreme Court clerk, he just said, that's it. And then the justice would say, thank you. I appreciate you sharing all that information. So it's just a great way to, I think, share communication and help others feel heard as well. So you can use it at a high level and on an interpersonal level as well.
Hell yeah. We're all about asking questions here.
Yeah.
But
so
I love
that's good advice I received. Ask people what else, what else?
Yeah, all three of those points that you touched on are super critical, I think, but especially the second one, because that speaks to not letting anybody else have power over you. Like if you get upset because somebody did something, like you're giving that person the power to take your peace away, and you should never let anybody take your peace away, right? Because we should be stronger than that, right?
Certainly, we try to be. I fail every day, so if you're listening to this, I'm a good example of somebody practicing. I have not yet perfected any of the things I'm talking about. So there's days where I don't listen. There's days where I don't say what else. There's days where, I do take things personally, and I'm fucking trying to grow. I think it's the most important thing, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's a learning process, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Question number 2. What do you willfully ignore?
So that's interesting. What do I willfully ignore? I've been trying to adopt this perception of like ignoring, the paradigm, the schema, the world schema that's been presented to me, and ignore that and find what I really think by looking inside. So I've been trying to ignore a lot of things that the world tells me how they are. Like, not ignore, maybe that's not the right way, because you do actually pay attention to it and you respond to it. So I might have to rethink about this question. What do I willfully ignore? Sometimes maybe just, here's what I willfully ignore. This is an easy answer. Behavior I don't like. So it's a trick I learned, right? It's a behavioral psychology trick. Like if you don't like some type of behavior, the best way to treat it is to ignore it, right? So for example, if you have somebody who doesn't like your content or the things you do, if you shed light on them and you give them attention, they'll generate more hate. They'll generate more energy. They're like, oh, perfect. I wanted your attention. I wanted you to respond. So the best way to treat some behaviors when you don't like them are to ignore them. Because like you have a kid or you have an annoying student maybe you're working with, and like, man, how do I address this behavior? And sometimes the easiest way to address something is to ignore it and not give it attention. So I ignore behavior I don't like. So in my personal life and on mine, like if I don't like that shit, I'm going to ignore it. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to kind of, I don't know, ask the question in a different way, because to be willfully ignorant of something would be like you still have an awareness of what's going on, but you choose not to. So I mean, your second answer was correct, but where were you going with? I mean, your second. What was the first thing that came to your mind about the world? The word narrative is what I wrote down.
Just like. So what, like the paradigm that's been presented to you through your education and the way the propaganda is dispensed, like I'm trying to ignore all that conditioning and find out how the world works for me. Like when I read a textbook, what do I think? When I listen to somebody give a lecture or a talk, what do I think? So I'm trying to just like, I'm the news. I'm the person who dictates the response to anything. So, that's why I like to read first edition books. I love first edition books. I know we'll talk about books later, but I like this source, and then I like to digest that source myself. Like, if someone wants to tell me about a Bible verse, I'd rather read the Bible verse myself and ignore what they think. Well, in some sense, and generate my own opinion.
Yeah, I love that because we're using discernment at that point, and like there's so like that gets so much. I'm finding it to be more important the older I get, because we can acquire so much knowledge, and then as time goes on, you see certain patterns and things start to repeat, and then this allows you to make a judgment call from what you've observed, and like seeing if it resonates within us and for ourselves is super important, and then just accepting what it's meant or told, accepting what we're told it's meant to be at face value, right? So
certainly discernment. I love that word you use. And although I've been familiar with it for most of my life, I've been trying to incorporate it more and more into my life. So it's nice little synchro that you use that. And I love hearing people, include that in their vocabulary, because we should be more concerned about how we discern certain things in our world. So I love that.
Yeah,
great point, Bill.
Especially with reading books, I mean, which is our next question. But like when I just finished reading a few books, and maybe I didn't agree with the author on everything they said, but I still read the book, right? But I was able to kind of pick out what resonated with me and what didn't. So that might be kind of a tangent, but leading into question 3, which, by the way, is what book has been most influential on your life and why?
So this is an interesting question. I want to preface this with the fact that I didn't. So I've read most of my life. I read what was assigned to me, and I read it in the most, like, for example, in school, K through 12, if someone told me to read something, I would read it in my preferred way, skim reading, whatever. I might read a chapter to chapter. I did not read, right? In the general sense. I thought reading was anti-intellectual for some fucked up reason. And I thought that if you could get a good grade, if you could do well without reading, you were smarter than the kid that read and got the same A. So I had this weird mentality when I was young about, like, I can get an A and I don't have to read the book. So I didn't read all the way up until, like, I got a undergraduate and a minor in political science and constitutional studies. And so I read what was assigned, but read it how I wanted. And I still never read really a book. And I graduated summa cum laude, right? That seems like it's important. It's not. And I hadn't read. So I applied to a master's program for teaching. And I eventually was put in the position to tell children to read. And boy, if you don't read and you don't like reading, do you feel like a hypocrite? And so I hadn't read a book. I'm 27 years old in a master's program telling, I'm in a teacher's program, and I'm telling kids, like, oh, there's time to read. Reading's fun. Yeah, reading's great. And for some reason, I did not like reading. So I decided at that moment I wasn't going to be a hypocrite. I went home and I started to read. And the first book I read and completed was Waking Up by Sam Harris. And if you go to my website, chanceblakelock.com or Log Cabin Librarian, I have my completed reading list from the time I actually started reading, in a conscious way. So the answer to this question is going to be a book from this list. And as I'm, pondering over this list, there's a few authors that have really impacted me. And I'll tell you, probably the most impactful author is Neville Goddard. So Neville Goddard is a Christian mystic. I don't know if either of you are familiar with him. He changed my life 100%. Freedom for All and a Practical Application of the Bible is one of the books I read. Another book I've read of his is Feeling is the Secret. Another book I've read of his is Prayer and the Art of Believing. And I'd say Prayer and the Art of Believing has been the most influential book in my life. And when I started to practice some of these manifestation techniques and, I would call them, belief practices, my life changed, and it's been changing ever since. And I stopped reading as much because after I read Neville Goddard, I said, oh, I get it. Everything started to click. I was searching for some type of individual who could change the way I was thinking. And so it's funny to start to share this. And, like, what's my favorite book? Well, it's Neville Goddard. And he's also one of the reasons why I stopped reading. Because, and I still do read occasionally. And I love the question about reading. And I now read, if it's for fun, Neil Gaiman is an author I love. Good Omens is just a great book. I love George Orwell, Animal Farm. And anything science fiction. I'll tell you this, people watch Black Mirror, and that's on Netflix. And I'll introduce them to Philip K. Dick and his short stories. And if you like Black Mirror, just understand they pretty much ripped a lot of George Orwell's perspective of, how to create and tell a story in a way that distorts people's reality and makes them feel that they're not really living in the place they're really living in. So, got to give a shout out to Philip K. Dick. That's a long-winded answer, but I hope that somehow brings some closure to the question.
Yeah, no, I think that's a super interesting story about Neville Goddard. I haven't read anything by him. Adam, are you familiar with Neville?
Only by name, not in reading.
Yeah, there's I forget which podcast it is, but they do they just read his his lectures or books or passages or whatnot. So I listen to that on YouTube sometimes. And yeah, it's good stuff. I'll have to look into him.
I'll mention this about Neville. You know, someone's good when they won't let them be on Wikipedia. So like that was also like a, ooh, you know, that I was like, why isn't he on Wikipedia? I'm like, what's going on with this? And also another thing about reading that I really got invested in was like trying to find the authors people didn't want you to read. So Neville Goddard became one of them because he's like not on Wikipedia. He's not talked about. But he changed my life for sure. And I could share a few stories about that. But books in general are, I think, probably the most influential thing for the West. It's the West, in my opinion's form of meditation. So on the East, you think the philosophy mindset, right? They sit by themselves and they meditate on their thoughts. But you know, on the West, we were raised on meditating on the word. So we do better in developing the neural pathways towards meditation that it's achieved on the East by reading holy words or holy scripture. And I think that could be Thich Nhat Hanh. I think that could be Alan Watts. I think that could be the Bible. Holy scripture comes in, I think, a lot of words. So in the West.
I love that analogy that you gave, that reading for meditation in the West is I've never heard reading described like that before. And I would agree with it. It's absolutely what I get out of it. Right.
Because you can't do anything else. People confuse themselves like, oh, I listen to books on tape. You're not reading. Like, I love that you think you are. Your comprehension of the storytelling is great. I believe you understood all of the parts of the story. Your comprehension is top notch. But in fact, when you read, you can't do anything else. You can't do the dishes. You can't watch your kid. You can't fold laundry. Reading is, you're stuck. You're stuck and you can't move. People can go on walks and read, I guess, or be on the treadmill. But in some sense, your eyes and your mind and your third eye is just boom. You're not moving. You're not going anywhere. And if someone's talking to you, you're not reading anymore. You're listening.
Yeah, it's a very attention heavy activity, I guess.
I dove into reading heavy because I had to propagandize these kids on how important it was. So I became the biggest reader. I believe in reading so much now. It changed my life. And it's a gift to humanity if you can read. And there's this story, I don't know if it's true, I'll share this. I heard this in college. So that's my source I'm citing. St. Augustine was a saint, Christian mystic. And there was a point where in history where the only way people knew how to read was reading out loud, right? So reading silently and in your head, nobody knew you could do that shit. And so St. Augustine pulls up on these bitches. He's like, yo, I can read in my mind. No fucking way. And he does it, bro. He reads silently. And he's the first person who cracks that code. You know, the first person who runs a 4-minute mile, right? And he shows everybody how to do it. St. Augustine was that person. But there was a time in history, apparently, where nobody knew how to read in their head. And St. Augustine rolled up on these bitches and was like, watch this. And they said, okay, what does this say? And he had read it in his head, right? So he, boom, tells them. And it's crazy. So
it's amazing what we take for granted in our ability to, like comprehend information. That's a huge advancement that we have. Where would we be without that?
Yeah. It's a miracle too. And that's one thing I try to explain to kids. When I heard that story, I was like, it's a superpower if you can look at something and read it in your head. Just like boom, and you absorb all that information. It's silent. Nobody knows, right? It's just a secret message. You got it. You read it. Nobody knows you read it.
Yeah, that is super. I did. It seems like a good way to like send subliminal messages too, if you know how to read. But literacy is super important. And I have heard that the Library of Alexandria was actually built for reading out loud. Like I guess I can't cite a source.
That's all they knew how to do.
Yeah, but Yeah. So
That's all they knew how to do.
can you imagine walking into a library and it being loud because everybody's reading out loud instead of quiet like it is today?
Yeah. And the first book, you look at like Odyssey, right? And Homer, right? So those books were actually songs. So you had to memorize the songs. So they were songs before they were books. People forget that too, that before there were books, everything was a song and people would have to memorize these songs or like in their heads. And then that was their education. How well can you sing the Odyssey? How well can you sing Homer? So, and then language has changed so much. And I've only learned, and I'm regurgitating a few things from a few authors that I'll cite right now. Harold Enos and Marshall McLuhan. Both of them are Canadian academics in the 60s and 1900s. So both of those changed my view entirely on the methods of communication and reading. So I'm not, I like to kind of give people a direction to some of the information that I regurgitate. So Harold Enos and Marshall McLuhan changed my views entirely about reading and TV screens or screens in general. Sorry.
Question number 4. What rule do you have for yourself that you never break, and why do you think that it's important?
What rule do I have for myself? That's a great question. I think I want to be as authentic as possible. So a rule for me is to not have a persona, which is difficult because right now I'm the Provo kid, I think anytime you're in a situation with other people, you're always presenting something that's other than yourself. So I'm trying to maintain this unbridled principle of authenticity and anarchy, and like I will be myself. I will speak my truth, but it's a difficult, I want to be that, but sometimes you're in public and you want to call someone a fucking idiot and you can't because you're with your kid and it's not socially appropriate. And but the real me wants to tell that person they're a fucking idiot. So I do break my own rules sometimes just because it's socially appropriate. It's not socially appropriate to act out and be your true self, which is a weird world. Because our true selves, if we could really be ourselves, I don't know. I'd like to tell people what I really think sometimes because there's a lot of bad drivers, but I don't even honk. I just breathe in and breathe out and let things go as much as possible. But the real me wants to fuck you. And be myself and let out some form of aggression. Because I think aggression is important. There's this weird mentality that, the middle path or non-aggression. Or I think hate and aggression are very important aspects of our life and humanity. And to stuff those down and say oh, they don't exist or they're not a part of your life is kind of an illusion. And I like that illusion too. And I try to paint it, but I also want to make my hate fun. So I'll hate things or I'll be hateful too. Or I'll redirect that energy in a creative form, I would say. But what rule I don't even know if I answered that question. Did I?
I would say yes. Yeah. In my book, it counts.
Cool, man. I try to be myself, but it's difficult.
No. Yeah, I understand. But it reminds to tie it back into the first answer, being impeccable with your word. I think that goes along with not taking anything personally, because that was one of the 2 of the 4 agreements that Don Miguel Ruiz talks about in his book. I think that, yeah. But so when we're I don't know, you were saying how it's hard to be to sometimes we have to stifle ourselves or our expressions, but when we're mindful of being impeccable with our word, maybe we don't want to speak, or express ourselves in a non-loving way.
Yeah.
That to me is our being, authentic to yourself is staying, expressing with love. So
certainly. I love that.
I think it's doable.
It is doable, and I'm working on it.
It's always a process. I haven't read Don Miguel Ruiz yet, but I his 4 agreements though have been, something that past guests have mentioned before, and they've stuck with me. So,
wow, yeah, I've actually read it, and it changed my life. So, everything changes your life. That's the whole. When people say it changes my life, what doesn't? everything changes your life on some
Noticeable
basic concept.
impacts or change, directional changes where you're like, I feel the shift.
Oh yeah, feel the shift where I want to be a nicer person and I want to think about my language as magic and I want to talk positively about everybody. Because if you say a curse to someone, that curse comes back. And you don't, that's one reason why I try not to be curseful towards other people, but I'll curse inanimate objects sometimes, like a red light. It's easy to like be upset at that stuff.
Right. For those of us that still commute.
Yeah.
I'm about to sell my car. It's the only reason I bring that up.
Wow. Congratulations, brother.
Yeah. Mixed feelings about that. But,
Mixed feelings.
well, I'll talk about that later. Maybe in the intro we'll get to that. But
Cool.
anyway, question number 5. If I were to ask your best friend, what is the one thing they would say you need to work on the most and why?
That's a good question. My best friend is my spouse. So, and it could be my friends too. So I'm trying to think about answering this question in like a diplomatic way or an androgynous way. Like if I had a friend who was both my wife and also the friends I've grown up with, what would their response be to this question? And I think it would be communication, right? Because I don't communicate as effectively as other people do. And the reason why is because here's my excuse, right? If you're like, what's your excuse? I grew up with cell phones. So there's this weird reality where we all grow up where there's this expectation, right? Where somebody can send you a message. And I look at it like this. Cell phones are like it's a fucking leash, right? It's a leash to yank other people into your reality. So someone will text you, right? Like, hey, pay attention to me. And before cell phones, that fucking shit was not possible. You wouldn't be at the park and all of a sudden someone's messaging you and like, fucking come into my reality. Talk to me, talk to me, talk to me. So I don't like the fact that other people can make you think about them in a controlled manner by calling or texting. So, because I do remember growing up where that wasn't part of my life, right? I was a kid. There were no cell phones. I was in elementary school. I didn't have a phone. The only way to get a hold of me was to fucking find me. So I kind of resented, I guess, the general growth of communication lately. And I don't like communicating like, oh, you sent me a message. I'll communicate immediately right back. And although I do try to maintain, I guess it's what's it called? A secretary type order with my Provo kid and my business, but in general sense with my friends and family, sometimes I don't get back to them as well as I should. So my biggest thing I need to work on is definitely communication, but I disagree with the forms of communication. I don't like the phone. I don't like it one bit.
Yeah, I remember pre-cell phone days and pre-internet days vaguely, but yeah, dude, it was such a different world and it was simpler. You know, if you wanted to meet up somewhere, you just had to pick a time and hope the other person showed up, right?
Yeah. And if someone called, you could say, Mom, tell him I'm not home. That was awesome. And you know what? My brother used that growing up. I never got to say it because people called me.
Yeah, everybody's got a personal phone. So
yeah, so there was a time where I'm like, I can't wait for people to call and say, hey, is Chance there? That's my real name. Is Provo Kid there? And I'm like, Mom, tell him I'm not here. Because it was such a cool cop out. And I never got to use it.
question number 6. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
I would say being contrarian or antagonistic to authority, because I don't like I grew up with a father with a PhD in psychology and a mother with a JD, so she's a lawyer. So I grew up with a psychologist and a lawyer raising a child, and so I grew up some resentment towards authority. Not entirely, but like it's hard to argue against a lawyer, and then the psychologist tells you why your thinking is wrong. So a lot of my childhood was spent learning about why my argument sucked and my thinking wasn't correct. and it was beneficial. But through that, even understanding that my father was a psychologist and my mother was a lawyer, they didn't get me, right? They didn't understand this. And I realized like, oh, you could be a psychologist and not understand this concept. You could be a lawyer and not get this. And then my brain started to unfold and like, oh, they're people. Like these are titles. And so authority to me kind of dissolved immediately. I'm like, oh, you're a doctor? You know what I mean? It means nothing to me because I know who people are. And I was raised with really intelligent people and fortunate to have the experience that I've had. And so it's given me this angst to question everything. So what turns me on? Questioning authority, questioning what people tell me, questioning, oh, here's the facts, really? Or like, I don't know, my brain just works differently than I just like to question first. I guess that's my first thing because I don't believe authority anymore.
Yeah, it's super interesting to see that in, I guess, this whole like natural law movement or topic I've been hearing pop up on podcasts, like sovereignty and how the difference between like our fictitious entities and like the actual person, the living person. Like it just reminds me because, you know, doctors and lawyers, like these are titles, right? These are fictitious things that.
Yeah, they're people.
Yeah.
They don't know shit. Like they're experts at one thing, right? They're experts at one thing. So it's like Dr. Fauci, great, you know virology, but you don't know shit about civil liberties. You know what I mean? You're a fucking idiot. You didn't spend any time learning about personal sovereignty and rights. So fuck off. Like stay in your fucking lane. And some people get confused because an expert will just be like Bill Gates. Apparently he's a fucking expert in multiple fields. He's a great farmer. He's a great, medical expert. And like, it just doesn't make sense to me. I question that authority immediately. And I don't know, man, I'm losing my words.
No, like even if you have a quote unquote authority in a certain area, like maybe you don't know everything there is. Because if you ask a doctor about nutrition, like a lot of the times they don't know what to say, right?
Oh, so I love what you're saying there because that's so true. That's why they got foot doctors, ear doctors, leg doctors, groin doctors. Like you name a doctor, there's a doctor just made for that. Because the reality of someone learning everything, they got to learn everything. That's impossible. So they break it down. So you have one expert, and he's a doctor, but he's a foot doctor.
And then it's so specialized after that it becomes almost ineffective because everything's connected in your body. You can't just look at the foot and then I don't know. Going
exactly. How do you look at a virus and not the whole human anatomy? So you're an expert in virology, but not in the human anatomy, like in the sense of the body as a whole. And so some people, I think education has been distributed into silos, and it's been very intentional to keep everybody separate. And they don't want interdisciplinary learning going on, but that's what the internet allowed. So now you, Adam, Grimerica show, everybody is interdisciplinary. Everybody's learning everything. And that's how education should be. And education is a fraud on its face, as far as what I've experienced.
Yeah, that's also been a popular answer. The education system has been a popular answer to one of our bonus questions. Yeah, it's definitely everybody seems to have a beef to pick, or a bone to pick with that. Yeah,
I hate it.
Yeah. Question number 7: what was the most embarrassing or humbling experience of your life?
So I mentioned earlier I graduated summa cum laude, and so I have the medal right here. Right, so this is a medal I got for graduating with a 9 point something in my undergraduate. Right, and now I was supposed to wear it when I walked, and I told I'm with my friends, and I told them, I got the medal, blah 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 blah. But I get out of the car, I get in line, and I can't find it. My medal disappeared. So I do my whole graduate. I get in line, and I'm standing next to a friend of mine who's going to go to Michigan Law School, and he also graduated summa cum laude, and he has a medal, and I don't. I'm the one who told him I graduated summa cum laude. I don't have a fucking medal. And I look like an idiot. So we go through the whole fucking show. I get in my car. I feel stupid. And then I reach for my keys, and in my keys, there's my medal. And I had the medal with me the whole time. And it was kind of the most humbling experience in my life. Like, sometimes you want to show people what you have. You want to tell them. But really, what you have is inside. Like, the idea of a medal is so fucking stupid. And so I just felt like God gave me the most important message ever. Like, don't ever confuse yourself. Like, what I gave you is inside. The medal doesn't mean shit. So I felt fucking thankful that, I did have my, medal with me the whole time, but fuck it. I didn't need to wear that shit. It was in my pocket. It didn't mean nothing. And it still, it means something, quote unquote, because of the experience, but I don't give a shit about the educational system. But it was humbling to know that what I thought about myself was validated, and I didn't need anybody to see it.
It sounds like a moment of clarity, right? Like eureka moment, right?
Yeah, definitely. And the penny dropped, right, for me. That's another way to say it. Penny dropped.
Question number 8. What is your greatest fear? How did you overcome it if you have?
So my greatest fear has been like sharing my own personal voice, right? And my other greatest fear is heights. So how do I get by my greatest fear of heights? I fucking stay close to the wall when I'm walking, and it's a weird fear. And then, but my greatest fear of being myself, how did I overcome that? I'm overcoming it every single day. My podcast that I do and that I started was a podcast where I talk to myself out loud for an hour. And the reason I did that was because I wanted a podcast where I didn't need anything. I just needed me. And so, but that's a big fear, to be yourself and to share that hour every day with people. Like, who are you as a stream of consciousness talking out loud for an hour? And every day when I try to do the podcast, I still get a little bit of fear of like, man, I got to share myself. I don't have to, but I'm going to, and I have to talk for an hour. I don't have to, but I will. How do I get past that fear? I just imagine that, I don't know, somebody likes it. There's somebody. And then I understand that today, if you're not creating something online, and God willing, this stuff stays up and the end of the world doesn't happen and our great-great-grandchildren have access to this, they're going to ask, like, why weren't you making something? Like, or, they're going to be asking questions like, where's the data? Why don't I have more data? That's what our great-great-grandchildren will be asking if this facade of what we have lives on. So that's also one thing. Like, how do I get over this fear? Just imagining that maybe in 100 years, God willing, people will still find podcasts interesting. They'll look back and they'll find me and Bill and Adam having a good conversation. And they'll maybe have an assignment on it, and the educational system will keep rolling. Who knows?
Yeah, that's amazing. The just creating content or being creative, like using the creative faculty is so, like, I've found it so liberating. That's not a word, but you know what I mean. It's
Absolutely.
It definitely helps with stepping out of your comfort zone and speaking up and speaking out, because I that's something that I've had to learn to deal with by not starting this podcast, but by being a part of it anyway. But
yeah, courage, man. It takes courage to, just put your voice out there. And it's a weird thing. I think that's why a lot of people don't do it. And people will say, there's so many podcasts. No, there isn't. There's not enough. A lot of people aren't sharing their voices. It just might seem like there is. But the reality is, it's a small group of people who are even willing to put their voice out there. And I encourage more people to put their voice out there. And there's not enough podcasts. There's not enough people sharing their voice. And, everybody needs to be heard, and more people need to use these platforms. We need to flood them.
Yeah, I
We need to
agree.
flood 'em.
And I love that just the stream of consciousness. I mean, this is authentic, right? This is just, off the cuff, right? And that's something I think is, that we need more of, right? That we should flood the airways with. And that's one of the things that drew me to Grimerica, actually, was just during their interviews, they would just kind of talk back and, how the Grimerica show is, but you can tell that they're just being authentic and they're just people and they're just trying to have a good time and learn along the way, right? And
They're having fun.
yeah.
Like, that's the best part, guys, of life, is having fun, talking with your friends. And more people need to do it.
Yeah. And, it just creates beautiful things like this show. So
Certainly.
go out and create, and it's fun. Yeah. Question number 9. What is your single greatest driving force in life, and how do you further it?
So my single greatest driving force in life is I consider myself an artist, and I think everybody should. And the fact that I look at everything in art, so I have a child, that's a piece of art that I made. And I call myself a conscious parent. I'm very conscious about parenting. I almost consider it competitive sometimes, not with other people, but with myself, on how to raise a beautiful piece of art, a person, And I look at everything, my environment, as art. So what's my single greatest driving force? Just, I think when you realize that everything is, I guess, important, like the way your room looks, the way your house is, the way you talk to your child, like everything matters. And everything can be done in an artful way. Like, just be an artist about it. So like, I try to be super creative with my problems. My child's, for example, we're on a walk and she wants to stop and see the kitty because there's a stray cat. I said, no, look how beautiful these birds are. And I try to create another painting for her to look at and to drive her attention and show her the art of the world, and just be creative in some sense. That might be a bad analogy, but my single greatest driving force is just trying to make everything art. There's no limit to it. Podcast as an art form is an audio visual art form. So people confuse themselves. They think, oh, Nietzsche. You think, first of all, Nietzsche would be labeled special education. He never would have written a book. But even if he got out of the system and became himself, you think he would have written books? He'd been on computers, right? Like, he would have been engaging in the medium of his time. The greatest minds would always engage in the medium of their time. And some people are confused that, podcast isn't an art. Like, everything's an art. And we're making, I think, a piece of art right now, and I love it.
Absolutely, we are. I like to have the analogy that we're casting spells.
Oh, certainly. I love that.
Life imitates art. Art imitates life. So how does that go? But it can go either way, I suppose. But yeah,
certainly.
Why not make every moment, just be conscious about it, and it's a way of like sanctifying it almost, right?
Yeah, you're the artist. If you don't do God's work, who will? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. If you want a job done correctly, you have to do it yourself, right?
Good one. I like it.
Absolutely.
Who are or were your role models, and why?
So I've already mentioned them. They're my mom and dad. And it's, they've been, I resent some paths I've taken in education, but I'm glad I was educated. But my parents are old. They're boomers, and they got out of poverty through education. So I have a grandpa who was a coal miner and another grandpa who was a bank sweeper. And somehow my parents figured out education was going to make their life something. And they told me that was the path too, but things changed, right? So I grew up when teachers would tell you can't make money playing video games. Well, motherfucker, I'm 23 years old and there's a motherfucker playing video games making $1 million a month. Right. And
Jervis just won the Lasso Halo 2 challenge, had a $20,000 jackpot on it.
Yeah. And I loved, you know what I mean? So I followed a path that my parents knew would in some sense work, but times had changed. But what they did show me was that I can learn a lot. And although I resent the educational system. Now I get to talk about it. Now I get to expose it for what I think it is. And I appreciate them for being the models they are. But now the reason I'm not a lawyer is because I don't want to be one. And the reason I'm not a doctor like my father is because I don't want to be one. And it's great to have a role model like that can show you don't have to take their path, even though after they prescribed it for you in some sense, where they said, get an education, go this way. And now I'm doing not anything that they are. But what they did show me is, you have to never stop learning. And it's weird when I talk about education, because education for them is different from me, but they are definitely my role models because they showed me that they're still working, by the way. They're in their 70s, man. And this is nuts to think about. And I don't know if Joe Biden inspired like the baby boomers to keep working. Like, hey, he's a president. You guys got to keep working. But I'm just blessed that both of them in their 70s. My dad's been working. He started working 90-hour shifts in New York, Queens, in the 60s or something at a Big Bow Wow. It's not a restaurant anymore. But to get to where he was, from slinging pizzas to a PhD to raising a son who says, fuck the educational system. I love it, man. It's such a fucked up path.
And I'm glad that you made the distinction that it was different for education back in the day, because it was a way out of poverty. And like, we had a guest not too long ago on the show, Tom Campbell. Tom worked with Robert Monroe and does other, out of body work and workshops and classes and talks all the time. But Tom's older, right? And he wouldn't be, offended if I said that, I don't think so. But that's absolutely like his story was like, he worked his way up out of poverty, and that was back then a viable thing to do. Like nowadays, like you get an education, you just go into debt. Like
exactly, you become a wage slave.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the whole fucking problem now. It's a system of creating wage slaves where education was different, right? Like my dad could work a summer and pay off a semester. You know what I mean? It's a totally different world people are living in now, and different systems.
100%.
It's so crazy.
Question number 11. What quality do you most admire in a woman?
So there's a few things, but I'd say there's this weird myth. Like I said, my mother was a lawyer. So as I became, educated, they would say, women had it so hard. And women just struggled. And I was like, women are heroes. Women are badass. When I was growing up, there weren't any weak women in my life. So the propaganda I received in college was counter to what my anecdotal personal life experience was. My personal life experience told me women are at the top of the food chain. They are hard workers. They aren't discriminated against. They can do what they want. And so, this weird propaganda I had to confront. And I want to say this is what I'm trying to think about how to really round this question as a whole. What do I admire in women? This idea that, they don't attach themselves to what society tells them they are. Like, society's trying to dictate to women what they are and what they were. So if they were in the past and they were a mother at home, they were called stay at home. Now think about that term. That's not free. You stay at home and you're a mom. So now that they've really I think they've programmed the whole language just so perfectly. But what I admire in women, in short, is people who just break conventions, do what they want. They have a target and they go after it. In my life, women went after something. They were always achieving things. It was never a passive thing. Women have never been passive in my life, but in history, apparently they've been painted as passive and been told what to do. But in my life, man, they're hellraisers. They're doing what they want. They're climbing mountains. So what do I admire the most is, I guess independence and just this thirst to do what they want, and anarchy. I'm really driven towards anarchy as an individual. So if you meet a woman who is just a bit of an anarchist herself and can't be tamed, like a wild stallion, so to speak, that's what I admire. Because independence and a thirst to be yourself is, I think, the most important thing you can have in life. So that's the thing I admire. Is I'd say that.
Absolutely. I mean, that ties in kind of, calls back to or an earlier response of yours about being contrarian to authority, right? And the way you said it for women is not attaching themselves to what society tries to confine them as, which is, questioning authority, and which is, it's obviously a good thing, right? Because if you can't question something, if you're not allowed to question this or that or a person, chances are you're in a cult.
Certainly. Yeah, and there's a cult. There's so many cults. People get confused about that. There's cults of culture. Like, what is culture? It's a big cult. Like, it's a micro cult. Like, you don't think Breaking Bad's a good show?
Yeah,
you can lose friends over that.
Right. It's this little bacteria that grows in a tiny, small, round glass dish. Right. That's a culture, isn't it?
Well, it's amazing, right? And they cults kind of have the same thing. So you get the same haircut, wear the same clothes. There's these just very basic things. So whether it's military or just the latest fashion trend, you're kind of getting tied up in it without realizing.
Oh, certainly. And I love looking at my yearbook. You could go to your yearbooks and like, oh, every kid's got the same fucking haircut. And how does that happen? It's nuts.
Yeah. We had uniforms, so all the kids wore the same clothes where I went to school.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's a cult.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway. Question number 12. What is the most courageous thing you have ever done or seen in your life?
This one, there's a couple I got to answer. So again, to the women in my life, this is easy. My mother, when I was in, what would have been probably 6th, 7th grade, developed breast cancer. And probably in 5th grade, and throughout the 3 years, she dealt with it. But she's also a lawyer and missed less than a week of work. And there was one day where I didn't want to go to school, and my mother had a blood bag, right, and like a couple tubes coming out of her, and she said, "You think I want to go to work?" And she said, "You're going to fucking school." Maybe she was a lot nicer than that. She said, "You can stay home." She probably said something nice, to be honest, like, "You can stay home, but look at me. I got a blood bag hanging out of me. I got to go prepare for a trial tomorrow, right? You think I want to go do that?" So that was it clicked in my head. I never missed a day of school all the way through college, my master's program. From the time I was in 6th fucking grade all the way till I graduated in my master's program, I didn't miss one fucking day of school, except for one, in my rhetoric class in my undergraduate program on the last day. And the reason I missed that day of class, because I'd already pronounced to everybody I'd never missed school. And you make a little rhetorical, exchange on the last day of class, and my exchange was not showing up. It was a different way of me giving a message, was to be different. So that was the last time. I mean, from 6th grade to my master's program, that was the only class I missed, was a rhetoric on the last day of class. Another thing, most courageous thing, I got to give a shout out. My niece just got a heart transplant last week, and she's out of ICU. And to see her, I've been told this little girl's going to die every year or two since the past 22 years. Because that's the reality of the problem she was given. And the most courageous thing I've ever seen is she's in her master's program as well right now, while she's doing her homework after receiving a heart transplant. And if I would have had her path, I would have never gone to school. I would have quit everything. And it's weird to, like, when people are dealt a hand like that and they say, fuck it, like, I'm going to keep going and I'm going to live as if my life's not going to end, and I'm going to apply to college. I'm going to keep doing my homework. man, that's courageous shit. And so again, women in my life, man, not weak, not submissive, something else. Got to give a shout out to them.
Yeah, it speaks to tenacity, right? Like being tenacious.
Certainly.
Absolutely. Badass too, man. Like,
Yeah, it's hard to be a pussy in my family.
question number 13. What does it mean to be a man in today's world?
Oh, this is a great question. So what does it mean to be a man? I think essentially a man is many things, and you come into, like, when do you become a man? And you could look at your conscious state, like the way your brain develops. And maybe it's around the age of 25, 26, 27. That's when it clicked for me too. People are like, oh, your brain stops developing around then. And I started to read. I took myself fucking seriously. And I also quit the belief that I was going to partake in that system at the same time. So what does it take to be a man? It takes individualism. And I think they're really trying to kill that socially. The idea of an individual is no longer palatable to the world elite. In fact, if you have a best friend in Europe, it's starting to be discouraged. So there's science and propaganda that's being disseminated amongst the academic elites in Europe that are trying to discourage children from having best friends because it's exclusionary, right? You don't want to be exclusionary, do you? You don't want to exclude other kids from being your best friend, do you? So that whole type of language is being eliminated. Close friendships are being eliminated in Europe. And what does it take to be a man? I think it takes just be an individual, right? Be yourself. If you can just be yourself and be an individual, you are a man. You know what I mean? Like, look, that's the hardest thing to do is to be yourself. And it's a day-to-day thing because it's easy to check. If there was all of a sudden, like the government rolled in and said, if you're not this subgroup, we're eliminating you. I'd say, I'm whatever you want. I would bend my principles to the fullest sometimes just to stay alive. So it's really hard to be an individual when I think the government at the end of the day controls a lot of our fate because they could draft you, right? What does it mean to be an individual when the government drafts you? I would dodge a draft. That's what an individual does, in my opinion. So if there's a draft in the future, please dodge it.
For real. No, but I love that the individualism, being yourself, like having the courage to not, put on this mask, right? Not to put on a front, to be, true to who to your highest self. And a lot of that has to, so it's a great answer, right? But I think a lot of that has to deal with being like being able to feel adequate with ourselves, right?
Oh, it's hard.
Yeah, it seems like especially men now, like the whole attack on masculinity and this whole toxic masculinity bullshit.
It's real.
Right? Like, and yeah, like we could talk about the elimination of the orgasm too, but we won't get in that deep quite yet. But I was unless Adam, did you? I was thinking about doing some bonus questions. Maybe what do you think about that?
I'm definitely down for a few of those, Mr. Bill. I got definitely one in mind.
Yeah, go. Why don't you pick out the bonus question? Well, yeah, why don't you go do that one first then?
Yeah, I'm got a couple bonus questions there, Bill. Bonus question number 1. What institution of society or structural aspect of modern life would you change given the chance?
Oh, wow. So what's one institution I would change? So that's a great question. And my first thought is the Constitution. And people would say, no, don't do that. But I think that they call it a constitutional convention, right? So I think that I'd like to see one of those happen, but I would like to have, if I could control it, the council who would decide the new constitution. Obviously, Joe Rogan's in there. I'd even have Darren and Graham. It would be I'd have Graham Hancock, Randall Carlson. You would just have I'd have experts of all these different minds and philosophies try to come up with another framework for governance, because I don't really believe that what we're living right now is what we're sold. In other words, people are telling us we're living under a constitution. It's a republic. To me, it looks like a wage slave empire, right? I can see past the illusion, and I'm ready to just take it down in a structured way and rebuild it in a conscious form. So I'd like to take another shot at, creating a new and more improved or more perfect union. I think that's the terminology, right? A more perfect union. I want another shot at that with today's minds because I think soon, this is my own personal conspiracy, that AI and algorithms will write our governance. So I'd like to see mankind with its brightest minds put together its last heave-ho of what a good governance might look like. So that's my answer to that question. Does that answer that sufficiently?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, I believe so. I think that's not one that we've had as an answer before, so it's super unique. I love it.
Bonus question number 2. What do you hope people will say at your funeral?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. Because I've been in my own head, right? Sorry, mom and dad. My mom already knows this. Their own eulogies, right? You think about your parents passing. Like, what am I going to say? Fuck. And so then, that's pretty kind of in the moment and a little bit in the future. But to answer your question, what do I want people to say at my funeral? That's a great question. I've thought about because the question is, remember your death. Right. So I've been trying to remember my death. I think it's a beautiful manifestation technique, by the way. So I actually have a real good concept of what my graveyard looks like and my plot and burial mound. So I want my gravestone. My wife knows this, and my family. It'll be a pyramid, and inside the pyramid will be books, and it'll be all the books it'll be like a time capsule. Right. So whether it lasts or not, I don't fucking know. So they'll be looking at what will people be saying at my funeral. They'll be like, man, what ego he had putting all those books in that pyramid. What the fuck is he thinking? He should have gave those to his kids, or there was something valuable in there. So I've really been trying to remember the end of my life in some sense too. It was like, I want to die at an old ripe age that's healthy. So I've been trying to visualize like me and the last moments of my life in a very positive way. Because I think the remember your death it's a manifestation technique that allows you to not worry about how to achieve success. Because if you die happy in the way you want to die, guess what, bud? You made it. You absolutely made it. And there's a lot of people telling you how to get the things that are closest to you, I guess the berries in the bush that are right next to you. But if you just worry about how your life's going to end and visualize that, you'll go through life and you'll achieve all the successes you want. And I really believe that. So the end of my life looks like, in short, me sitting on perhaps a patio, looking at the sunset, slowly closing my eyes on a slow microdose of psilocybin as my family prepares the burial plot. And it's probably a closed ceremony where they discuss a few things about me. And I'll probably record a tape to talk as well, to add some post humor. And they'll probably make a few comments about how great I was, hopefully. I've been thinking about that a lot. That's a great question.
I love that you're going to put books in your time capsule because, people buried stuff with them to use in the afterlife too, right? So you got to have something to read when you're, when you're on.
Nag Hammadi texts inspired me to do that. So I want to build my own Nag Hammadi text capsule.
Is it going to be, would you put what kind of books would you put in?
That's a great question.
Sorry.
Bill, we have a new question for the show now. What books will you bury with yourself?
So all the books I've read. So I'm only going to put any book I've read in the capsule. And then maybe some I don't know. That's a great question because I don't know if I want to take the Bible into the future. Do I? But if you take a book that quotes the Bible, you should have the Bible as a reference. So I've really been thinking about some of these things because if you have books that reference other books, you need to have all of them. That's where the pyramid comes into mind, where I structure the pyramid in the order of the books to mine, and then the references down towards the base level, because you can really break down a lot of references in some sense. Like, love the question. This is fun, you guys.
It reminds me, and maybe this is a little bit sidecar tangent thing, but like, they wouldn't be all comedy books, would they? Like,
Oh, no. Not at all. So a lot of the books would be, anything. So I'm Marshall McLuhan, Thich Nhat Hanh, Edward Bernays, Propaganda. I do a lot of things like John Holt, which he talks about homeschooling. I do Alan Watts, Aldous Huxley, and J.R.R. Tolkien, Neil Gaiman, Arthur C. Clarke.
okay.
So, and then aside from all of those, what I would like to build up the base of all of it, right? And it's kind of a funny concept because it requires quite the investment, but encyclopedia books. So the base layer, and it's hard. A lot of people don't know about these anymore. But I actually want already pre-collected like years, and kind of it's almost I almost think of it like as a Rosetta Stone of human history, if you could get enough of the encyclopedias from the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, dude, old encyclopedias are awesome, but
Yeah, they talk about Planet X in some of them, I think.
they talk a lot about a lot of. I've got a set actually. I need to dig more into it, spend more time with it. But the reason I asked why they wouldn't, or if they would be all comedies or not, because it reminded me of an analogy of like if you were stuck on a desert island and you only had a bunch of movies that you could watch, like what movies would they bring? And this was asked of like a group of people. I can't remember where I heard this from, so excuse me for not citing my sources, but so a lot of people answered with a variety of different genres, right? Few people chose all comedy like movies to watch with them while they're on this desert island. Well, that's kind of like an analogy for how we choose to come in to this realm and have these experiences. Because when we go to, to have a good time or whatever, to be at a movie theater, and we have experiences. They're not all comedies all the time. You're going to have a mixture of tragedy and comedy. And I think that's also ties back into like the whole comedy tragedy, like the two masks, like the two faces, the happy face and the smiley face, going all the way back to like, I don't know, ancient Greece or whatever. Like,
Oh, I love that topic. Yes.
if you zoom out enough, like
It's yin and yang, by the way.
becomes a comedy. It is what?
It's yin and yang, right?
That's I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
Comedy, because people think comedy. Yeah, man, I love that whole thing, because it's your life is a success and your life is a tragedy. And your point being like people who would just focus on the comedy. I'm almost about that spiritually, where people are trying to solve life, right? They want to crack the code. What's the secret? I think the secret is life is a gift and you're meant to enjoy it. It's kind of simple, right? And so people will delve into, and I love delving. I love just learning. I yearn to learn, as they say. But the real secret is that life is a gift, and it's so simple. You're just meant to enjoy it. And there's all these other things that are telling you not to enjoy it. You should give your life to climate change, give your life to social progress. So like, I think there's so many things trying to twist and tort you to make you go to everything external, everything outside of your life. But the truth is, it's simple. Life should be a comedy. To your point, it's meant to be enjoyed and have a good time.
I agree. And I think that is probably a pretty good place to wrap up. Adam, unless you had another bonus question that came to mind.
No, those were the ones that were burning in my mind, but the same back at you, Bill.
Yeah. No. Blakelock.
Chance.
Do you thank you for joining us for 13 questions plus 2 this time.
Absolutely. Hey guys, I have merch. I do a little bit of a merch thing. I've run out of my books, which is a good thing because you can't buy my book, but I'll send you both a copy of my merch. Not a copy, a sweater or a shirt. Do you guys have sizes?
That'd be a large.
Large, Adam?
Same. Yeah, I'm usually either a big, medium, or a large, whichever.
Perfect. I'll send you some merch. And then also once I get my second copies of my my book, I'll get you both a copy. But I just want to say thank you. It's been an honor. And I love this. This is probably the most fun I've had in a long time.
Listen, right back at you. I mean, I say this all the time, but it's time and your attention is the most valuable thing that we can offer anybody. So just you taking and spending your time and just being truthful and honest and open. It's a beautiful thing in this world. And
hey,
thank you.
Thank you, Adam. And thank you, Bill. You guys are, after listening to you now, I'm big fans. So it's kind of like meeting a newly made hero. So it's really cool.
Oh, thanks. That means a lot. Yeah.
Thank you.
And yeah, so we'll be in touch, dude. Well, we'll try to have this out in about a week or so. And you already sent me your bio, so I'm just gonna put that for the show notes and your Instagram and website. Is that anything else?
No, man, that's it. Just Provo Kid on Instagram. Yeah, I mean, if you want to listen to my podcast, I do interviews, right? And with local people from Utah. So if you're interested in stuff like that. Otherwise, I talk to myself for an hour. It's kind of a hard thing to pitch, but yeah, that's what I do. So thank you both for having me, and God bless you. Many blessings, man.
Why is one man rich and another man poor? Why we ain't satisfied? Why we gotta have more? Why your suicide rates on the rest so high? Why I tell you the truth but you say don't lie? Why is being a good father at an all-time low? Why is it acceptable? Yo, why I don't know. Why she blame him and he blame her? It's useless. Ask yourself this question. Why you making excuses? Why do parents gotta bury their kids? Why we text and drive, not caring how scary it is? Why it's so hard to forgive and leave the past behind? And if you did, then that's divine. Why don't you help your brother when you see him fall? Why do we act like God don't see it all? Why do we call them black, them white, them Asians and use labels? Now that's racism. I don't wanna Hawaii. Why? 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 I don't wanna Hawaii. Why is there innocent people locked up for life, while some people can't say nothing nice? Why do we always gotta question what all of it means? And why won't you follow your dreams? Tell me why. The night when you took my dad, why'd you let me see my grandpa cry? And tell me why. And why do you choose to hide, even though you was born to fly? And tell me why. And why don't we turn from all the hate? And why don't we learn from all mistakes? Why do I keep on wrecking these fat beats? And teachers don't make more than professional athletes? And why? And why? And why? And why? And why? And why? I don't wanna Hawaii. 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 I don't wanna Hawaii. Why? I don't wanna Hawaii. I don't wanna Hawaii. Why?
This should be considered entertainment and not therapy. We hope you benefit from our resources available at 13questionspodcast.com. Thank you for listening.